A retiring billionaire CEO is set to pass the torch, and his son confidently expects to inherit the company's leadership. But at the press conference, the CEO's announcement leaves his son, and the entire room, utterly speechless. The Langston Enterprises headquarters towered over the city skyline, its glass panels reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of power and prestige. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. Employees in sharp suits whispered in hushed tones, speculating about the impending announcement. The press conference was scheduled for noon, and the company's largest conference room had been transformed into a stage worthy of a Hollywood premiere. Cameras lined the back wall, while a sleek podium emblazoned with the Langston Enterprises logo stood at the front, waiting for its moment. Ethan Langston strode through the office with the poise of a man who already owned it. As the CFO, he exuded confidence, his tailored navy suit a perfect match for his polished demeanor. His colleagues nodded respectfully as he passed, murmuring congratulations in anticipation of what they all assumed would be his ascension to CEO. After all, Ethan had been groomed for this moment since he could remember. He had spent years mastering the art of the deal under his father's tutelage, learning to wield power with precision. Today was a mere formality. In stark contrast, Sophia Langston sat at her modest desk in the creative department, her brow furrowed as she reviewed a proposal for a sustainable packaging initiative. Her workspace was cluttered with sketches and prototypes, a testament to her hands-on approach to problem-solving. Unlike her brother, Sophia had carved her path in the company through ingenuity rather than hierarchy. She had a knack for finding innovative solutions to complex problems, though her efforts often went unnoticed by the upper echelons. She glanced at the email announcing the press conference and sighed. The word legacy practically screamed from the screen. Legacy wasn't something Sophia had ever felt a part of. Despite being Robert Langston's daughter, she had always been the quieter twin, the one who didn't fit the mold. The announcement felt like another chapter in a story where she was a minor character. Ethan's office was bathed in natural light, a corner suite that offered sweeping views of the city. He leaned back in his chair, a glass of sparkling water in hand, and allowed himself a moment to savor the impending victory. His assistant, Claire, poked her head in with a conspiratorial smile. "I just passed some of the speech draft to your father's PR team," she said. "All signs point to you." Ethan smirked, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. "I never doubted it." But later, as he walked past the executive boardroom, Ethan's ears caught something that made him pause. The door was ajar, and inside, his father's deep, commanding voice rang out. "This decision is about the future of Langston Enterprises, not just tradition," Robert was saying. Ethan leaned closer, straining to hear more, but the sound of approaching footsteps forced him to retreat. As he walked away, a seed of unease took root. What had his father meant by not just tradition? Sophia was oblivious to the brewing tension upstairs. She was immersed in a design presentation, her team excitedly debating the pros and cons of a new biodegradable material. But even as she contributed ideas, she felt a gnawing doubt. Did any of this matter in the grand scheme? Her efforts, though impactful, felt like drops in the ocean of Langston Enterprises' vast operations. As the clock ticked closer to noon, employees began filing into the conference room. Ethan stood near the podium, greeting board members and shaking hands with reporters. He kept a close eye on the crowd, scanning for his father. Sophia slipped in quietly, choosing a spot near the back. She felt out of place in the sea of tailored suits and practiced smiles. Her father had insisted she attend, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was here as a formality, a dutiful daughter playing her part. At precisely noon, Robert Langston stepped onto the stage, commanding the room with his mere presence. His silver hair and sharp suit exuded authority, and the room fell silent as he approached the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and resonant. "Today marks a pivotal moment in the history of Langston Enterprises. After 4 decades at the helm, I have decided to step down as CEO." A wave of polite applause rippled through the room. Ethan straightened his tie, his confidence returning. "As I reflect on my years leading this company, Robert continued. I am reminded of the principles that have guided us: innovation, resilience, and a commitment to shaping the future. Sophia listened, her father's words washing over her. She admired his eloquence but couldn't help feeling detached. This was his world, not hers. Choosing a successor, Robert said, his tone shifting to something heavier, has been the most challenging decision of my life. Langston Enterprises is not just a company, it is a legacy. And a legacy must evolve to thrive. Ethan leaned forward slightly, ready to rise when his name was called. Today, I am proud to announce that the next CEO of Langston Enterprises will be. Robert paused, letting the anticipation build. Sophia Langston. The room froze. For a moment, the only sound was the soft whir of camera lenses adjusting. Then a murmur spread through the crowd, a mixture of surprise, confusion, and even disbelief. Ethan's smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter shock. He blinked, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. Her father's voice continued, but the words blurred together as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. I believe Sophia has the vision and creativity needed to lead us into the future, Robert was saying. Her innovative work in sustainability is a testament to the direction this company must take in the years ahead. Sophia's heart pounded as heads turned toward her. She wanted to shrink into her chair, to disappear from the spotlight suddenly thrust upon her. Ethan's jaw tightened, his shock giving way to anger. He forced a smile for the cameras, but his clenched fists betrayed him. As Robert concluded his speech, the applause was polite but subdued, the room still processing the unexpected announcement. Ethan slipped out as soon as the press conference ended, his mind racing. How could this have happened? How could his father overlook everything he had done, everything he had sacrificed, to hand the reins to someone so unprepared? Sophia lingered at the back of the room, her father approaching her with a proud smile. You've earned this, Sophia, he said warmly. She opened her mouth to respond but found herself speechless. She didn't feel like she had earned anything. All she felt was the weight of expectation and the piercing gaze of her brother from across the room. As the cameras clicked and the crowd dispersed, the seeds of a storm began to take root. Ethan closed the door to his office with a deliberate slam, the echo reverberating through the sleek, modern space. His chest rose and fell in heavy, controlled breaths, his mind still reeling from the events of the press conference. The applause, the cameras, the whispers, all of it had blended into a cacophony that drowned out the single, deafening truth: his father had chosen Sophia. Sophia. Not him. He paced the room, the leather soles of his shoes muffled by the plush carpet. This wasn't just unexpected, it was a betrayal. He had spent years molding himself into the perfect heir to Langston Enterprises. He had sat through countless strategy meetings, taken the reins during crises, and proven himself time and time again. Yet when the moment finally came, his father had handed everything over to his sister. Ethan's fingers clenched around his phone as he dialed his father's assistant. I need to see him. Now. The assistant's voice was calm but firm. Mr. Langston is in meetings for the next hour. Ethan cut her off. I don't care. Tell him I'm coming up. Without waiting for a response, Ethan stormed out of his office, the fury in his stride enough to part the sea of employees in the hallway. He ignored the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed in his wake. The rumors had already begun to spread. Upstairs, Robert Langston's office felt like another world, quiet, composed, and unshaken. Ethan didn't bother knocking. He pushed the door open and found his father sitting behind the massive mahogany desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. Ethan, Robert greeted him evenly, though his tone carried a note of warning. This isn't the time for dramatics. Ethan shut the door behind him, his movements sharp. The time for dramatics? You've got to be kidding me. You blindsided me, Dad. You blindsided everyone. Robert sighed, leaning back in his chair. This isn't a personal attack, Ethan. Not a personal attack? Ethan's voice rose, incredulous. You named Sophia as the next CEO, Sophia, who's barely even scratched the surface of what it takes to run this company. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? How it makes you look? Robert's expression hardened. Enough. This isn't about appearances, Ethan. It's about the future of Langston Enterprises. Ethan crossed the room, planting his palms firmly on the desk. I am the future of Langston Enterprises. I've earned this. I've worked for it. I've sacrificed for it. And you? He pointed a finger at his father, his hand trembling. You threw it all away. Robert held his son's gaze, his own steel-like resolve unwavering. You think this decision was easy for me? It wasn't. But I've watched you, Ethan. You're brilliant, there's no denying that. But brilliance without vision is a dangerous thing. You focus on control, on power plays. You're always looking for the win, even when it costs others. That's not leadership. That's ambition. Ethan recoiled as if struck. So this is about morality now? About teaching me a lesson? This is about ensuring that this company thrives in a world that's changing faster than you realize. Robert replied, his voice firm but calm. Sophia understands that. She sees the bigger picture. She brings innovation and purpose to the table, qualities this company needs to adapt and grow. Ethan laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You think she's ready for this? You think the board will take her seriously? They'll eat her alive, Dad. And when this company starts to falter, you'll only have yourself to blame. Robert stood, his commanding presence filling the room. Sophia will rise to the occasion, and you'll do well to support her. You're her brother, Ethan, and you're still an integral part of this company. But if you let your ego dictate your actions, you'll not only hurt her, you'll hurt Langston Enterprises. Ethan stared at his father, his jaw clenched tight, his thoughts a storm of anger and disbelief. Finally, he turned on his heel and left without another word, slamming the door behind him. Sophia sat in her office, staring blankly at her computer screen. The congratulatory emails had already started pouring in, and her phone buzzed incessantly with texts from colleagues and old acquaintances she hadn't heard from in years. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about her unexpected promotion. Some were kind. Others were less so. She glanced down at her hands, which trembled slightly. CEO. The word felt heavy, almost foreign. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't prepared for it. Her father's announcement had blindsided her just as much as it had Ethan. She replayed his words in her head, searching for clues, for reasons why he had chosen her over her brother. The knock on her door startled her. It was Susan, her mentor and one of the company's senior executives. You holding up? Susan asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Sophia offered a weak smile. Barely. Feels like the walls are closing in. Susan sat down across from her. It's a lot, I know. But you're going to be fine. You've got what it takes, Sophia. Do I? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. Or is this just some elaborate way for my father to make a point? Susan tilted her head, studying her. Your father's no fool. He wouldn't put you in this position if he didn't believe you could handle it. And frankly, neither would I. I've seen your work, Sophia. It's visionary. You just need to start believing in yourself. Sophia nodded, though the doubt lingered. Ethan's furious, she said quietly. He's going to fight this. I don't know if I can handle that. Ethan's hurt, Susan said. And his ego's bruised. But you can't let that stop you. He'll come around, eventually. Right now, you need to focus on proving to everyone, including yourself, that you deserve this. As Susan left, Sophia leaned back in her chair, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. She felt like an imposter, an untested pawn in her father's game. She wasn't sure if she was ready to play, let alone win. Across the building, Ethan sat in his office, staring out at the city skyline. The anger in his chest hadn't subsided, but now it was mixed with something darker, determination. If his father thought he could sideline him, he was wrong. If Sophia thought she could fill the role of CEO, she would soon find out just how unprepared she was. The game was far from over. And Ethan wasn't about to lose. Ethan found Sophia in the executive lounge, seated near the window with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She looked up when he walked in, her face already bracing for what was coming. She could tell by the way he entered, quick, purposeful, his jaw set in that way that always meant trouble. The door clicked shut behind him, and the room seemed to grow smaller. "Let's skip the pleasantries, shall we?" Ethan said, his voice low but charged. "Tell me how long you've been planning this." Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "What? Don't play dumb, Sophia. How long have you been scheming with Dad to take what's rightfully mine?" His words cut like a whip, sharp and deliberate. Her confusion quickly turned to anger. "Scheming? Are you serious? I had no idea about any of this, Ethan. I was just as shocked as you." "Right," he said, pacing now. "You expect me to believe that? You, the golden child, the quiet little genius who's always one step ahead. You've been playing the long game, haven't you? Biding your time, letting me take the heat, while you swoop in at the last second." Sophia stood, her own frustration bubbling over. "I've never tried to take anything from you. You're the one who's always acted like this company was your birthright, like the rest of us don't even exist. If I wanted this, don't you think I would have prepared for it? I'm not even sure I want it now." "Don't lie to me," he snapped, stopping just inches from her. "You've always wanted to prove you're better than me. Well, congratulations, Sophia. You got what you wanted. But don't think for a second you can handle this job. The board, the investors, they'll see right through you." Sophia felt the sting of his words, but she refused to let him see it. "This isn't about me," she said quietly. "This is about you. You can't handle the idea that Dad doesn't think you're perfect. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Ethan's eyes narrowed, his face hardening. "If you think I'm going to sit back and watch you ruin everything Dad built, you're mistaken. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how unqualified you are." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Sophia standing alone, the weight of his accusations pressing down on her like a vice. The fallout was swift. By the next morning, the office was buzzing with speculation. Whispers filled the hallways, fueled by overheard conversations and subtle glances. Some employees rallied behind Sophia, inspired by her ideas for innovation. Others muttered doubts about her experience, their loyalty to Ethan coloring their opinions. The board was no different. Several members had taken the news poorly, openly questioning Robert's decision. Ethan's allies were particularly vocal, their doubts feeding into the growing tension within the company. Sophia tried to keep her head down, but the scrutiny was relentless. At meetings, she felt the weight of every gaze, the unspoken question hanging in the air: can she really do this? Even casual conversations were tinged with tension, employees either avoiding her entirely or overcompensating with forced enthusiasm. Ethan, meanwhile, played his part well. Outwardly, he was composed, the picture of professionalism. But behind the scenes, he was fanning the flames, subtly planting seeds of doubt among his colleagues and the board. He didn't need to say much. The skepticism was already there, and he knew exactly how to nurture it. Sophia's insecurities grew with each passing day. She had always been comfortable in her creative role, her contributions largely unnoticed but undeniably valuable. Now, thrust into the spotlight, she felt exposed, every move scrutinized, every decision second-guessed. The pressure was suffocating. She found herself in Susan's office one afternoon, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I don't think I can do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Everyone's against me. The board, the employees, half of them don't even think I deserve to be here." Susan leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You're right," she said after a moment. "Some of them don't think you deserve to be here. But that's not your problem. That's their problem." Sophia frowned. "How is that supposed to help?" "It helps because it means their opinions aren't set in stone," Susan said. "You have the power to change their minds. But you won't do that by shrinking into the background. You need to own this role, Sophia. Show them why your father chose you." Sophia shook her head. I don't even know why he chose me. I've never led anything on this scale before. Ethan was right about one thing, I'm not ready. No one's ever ready, Susan said firmly. Not completely. But leadership isn't about being ready. It's about rising to the challenge, even when you're terrified. And you're not alone in this. You have people who believe in you, people who want you to succeed. Sophia looked down at her hands, Susan's words sinking in slowly. It's hard to believe that right now. I know, Susan said. But let me tell you something. Your ideas? They're exactly what this company needs. Sustainability, innovation, forward-thinking, those are the things that will keep Langston Enterprises relevant in the next 20 years. And you're the one who can make that happen. Sophia took a deep breath, the knot in her chest loosening just slightly. She wasn't sure she believed Susan, but the conviction in her mentor's voice was enough to spark a small flicker of hope. Later that evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, Sophia replayed the events of the past week in her mind. Ethan's anger, the board's skepticism, her own crushing self-doubt, they all swirled together, a storm she couldn't seem to escape. But beneath it all, there was something else. A spark of determination. A quiet but growing resolve to prove everyone wrong. She thought of her father, of the trust he had placed in her, and for the first time, she began to see what he saw. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe she would fail. But she owed it to herself, and to him, to try. The next morning, Sophia walked into the office with a new sense of purpose. The whispers hadn't stopped, and the stares were as sharp as ever. But this time, she didn't let them get to her. She had a plan, and she was determined to see it through. Ethan watched her from across the room, his expression unreadable. He wasn't done fighting, and she knew it. But for the first time, Sophia felt ready to fight back. The days passed, and Sophia held her ground. But one morning, the office buzzed with an unusual tension as employees huddled in small groups, their voices low but urgent. Emails pinged incessantly, and the glow of screens illuminated furrowed brows and anxious expressions. A scandal had hit Langston Enterprises like a tidal wave, disrupting the carefully curated image of the company. The faulty product, a high-end consumer gadget touted for its revolutionary design, was being recalled en masse. Reports of overheating and minor injuries had surfaced online, quickly snowballing into a PR nightmare. Social media was ablaze with angry customers and damning hashtags, while news outlets ran segments dissecting the company's failure. Sophia stood in the boardroom, staring at the massive display screen showing a graph of their stock's rapid decline. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "How did this happen?" she asked, her voice tight. Across the table, Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He exuded a calm that felt almost mocking. "Quality control flagged this weeks ago," he said. "But the production team pushed forward to meet the launch deadline. Someone thought it was worth the risk." Sophia shot him a sharp look. "And no one thought to escalate this? To stop the launch?" Ethan shrugged. "I wasn't overseeing that division. That was..." He paused deliberately. "Your team, wasn't it?" Her stomach tightened. He wasn't entirely wrong. The faulty product had been part of an initiative she had inherited from a predecessor, but it was clear he was using the situation to undercut her credibility. She straightened, forcing herself to focus. "Pointing fingers isn't going to fix this. We need solutions." Ethan's smile was faint, almost condescending. "Welcome to crisis management, Sophia. It's not all brainstorming and innovation." Before she could respond, Robert entered the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. He took a seat at the head of the table, his expression grim. "We don't have time for infighting. This is about survival." The hours that followed were grueling. A damage control plan was devised, with Sophia and Ethan tasked with leading the charge. It was an uncomfortable partnership, born more of necessity than trust. Their first major clash came during a meeting with the PR team. Sophia proposed an honest, transparent approach, admitting the mistake, offering refunds, and emphasizing their commitment to improvement. Ethan countered with a more calculated plan, a carefully worded statement that downplayed the severity of the issue and shifted focus to other, successful products. "You want to downplay injuries?" Sophia asked, incredulous. "People got hurt, Ethan. We need to own up to that. And scare off every investor we have left?" Ethan shot back. "A full-blown apology is corporate suicide. We spin this, control the narrative, and move on." "It's not spinning, it's lying," she said, her voice rising. "And it's exactly the kind of thinking that got us into this mess." Robert intervened, his tone sharp. "Enough. You two need to find common ground, or this company won't survive the week." After a tense silence, they compromised, a hybrid approach that addressed the issue without fully conceding liability. It was a small victory, but the animosity between them lingered, palpable in every interaction. Despite their differences, they managed to make progress. Ethan's strategic mind proved invaluable in coordinating logistics for the recall, while Sophia's empathy helped soothe disgruntled customers and partners. The more they worked together, the more their strengths became apparent to each other. It wasn't easy, every decision seemed to spark an argument, but amid the chaos, small moments of mutual respect began to surface. During one particularly late night, as they sifted through customer feedback, Ethan glanced at her. "You handled that call with the distributor well," he admitted reluctantly. "I didn't think they'd back down, but you pulled it off." Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprised by the compliment. "Thanks. And your plan for reallocating the supply chain? It was smart." He smirked. "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not," she said quickly, then hesitated. "Okay, maybe a little." For a brief moment, the tension between them eased. But the truce was fragile, and neither of them fully trusted the other. Unbeknownst to Sophia, Ethan was playing a deeper game. While he worked alongside her publicly, he was quietly sowing seeds of doubt among the board. He framed his concerns as pragmatic observations, expressing worry over Sophia's inexperience, and suggesting that the scandal was proof she wasn't ready for the role. "It's not that I don't support her," he told one board member over lunch. "But this recall, it's a huge black mark on her leadership. I'm just worried about the long-term consequences." His words were carefully chosen, subtle enough to plant doubt without appearing overtly hostile. He knew how to play the game, and he was betting that, with time, the board would come to see things his way. Sophia, unaware of his maneuvers, continued to pour herself into the crisis. The pressure was immense, but she began to find her footing. She worked tirelessly, coordinating teams, refining strategies, and slowly rebuilding trust with stakeholders. It wasn't perfect, but she felt a growing sense of confidence that she could handle the challenges ahead. The scandal began to stabilize, though the damage was far from repaired. The company's reputation had taken a hit, and the path to recovery would be long and arduous. Sophia and Ethan emerged from the ordeal battered but standing, their uneasy alliance having accomplished what neither could have done alone. Yet beneath the surface, the cracks in their partnership were widening. Ethan's hidden agenda loomed like a storm cloud, ready to unleash chaos at the first opportunity. And though Sophia had proven herself in the heat of the crisis, she knew the fight was far from over. The road ahead would test her resolve, her vision, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of corporate politics. For now, though, she focused on the small victory they had achieved. She would deal with the rest when the time came, unaware that her greatest challenge was yet to come, and it was closer than she realized. The email landed in Sophia's inbox at precisely 8:03 a.m., its subject line sterile but ominous: "Emergency board meeting agenda required." Her stomach dropped as she scanned the brief message. There had been no mention of an emergency the day before, no crisis she hadn't already been managing. Yet here it was, an unscheduled meeting called by the board, with no explanation provided. Sophia immediately suspected Ethan. They had managed to stabilize the company after the recall scandal, but their fragile alliance had frayed in the weeks that followed. His thinly veiled criticisms during meetings, the careful way he positioned himself as the voice of reason, all pointed to something brewing. Now it seemed the storm had arrived. At precisely 9 a.m., Sophia walked into the boardroom. The room was filled with the company's most powerful figures, their faces a mixture of curiosity and tension. Ethan sat near the head of the table, his expression unreadable, though his perfectly neutral demeanor felt like a performance. Robert was notably absent, a fact that sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Sophia. She took her seat, keeping her back straight despite the tension in her shoulders. The board chair, an elderly man with a sharp gaze, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. CFO Ethan Langston has raised concerns about recent developments in the company's leadership, which we felt warranted an immediate discussion." Sophia's eyes snapped to Ethan, whose calm mask cracked just enough to reveal a flicker of triumph. He stood, clasping his hands in front of him. "This is not something I bring to the table lightly," he began, his voice measured. "But as a leader, it's my responsibility to ensure the stability and success of Langston Enterprises. Recent events have raised questions about the company's direction and, frankly, its leadership. The recall scandal alone cost us millions and damaged our reputation. And while we've made progress in managing the fallout, I believe these issues highlight a larger problem." Sophia's chest tightened. She forced herself to meet Ethan's gaze, determined not to show weakness. "The problem," Ethan continued, "isn't just the recall. It's a lack of experience at the helm. My sister, while incredibly talented, has been thrust into a role she wasn't prepared for. And I fear the consequences of that inexperience will only grow more severe over time." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I propose we hold a vote of no confidence regarding Sophia's leadership as CEO." The silence that followed was deafening. Sophia could feel the eyes of every board member on her, their scrutiny as heavy as the weight of the chair beneath her. Her heart raced, but she kept her expression steady. When the chair finally turned to her, Sophia rose, every nerve in her body screaming for her to stay seated. "I'll admit," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it, "I wasn't expecting this today. But since we're talking about my leadership, let's talk about where this company is headed." She gestured to the screen at the front of the room, where her assistant quickly loaded a presentation. "In the last few months, I've been working with a team to reimagine how Langston Enterprises operates, not just for today, but for the next 50 years. The recall wasn't just a crisis, it was a wake-up call. If we're going to survive and thrive, we need to embrace a fundamental shift in how we do business." Sophia clicked through the first slide, revealing a bold header, Langston 2.0, Building a Sustainable Future. Below it, sleek visuals outlined her vision for an operational overhaul focused on sustainability, innovation, and community impact. "This company has always been about progress," she continued. "But the world is changing, and the old ways of doing business aren't enough anymore. What I'm proposing isn't just damage control, it's a long-term strategy to future-proof Langston Enterprises." She walked the board through her plan. It included investments in renewable energy, restructuring the supply chain to prioritize ethical practices, and launching a new line of eco-friendly products targeted at emerging markets. Her research was meticulous, her projections promising. "This isn't just good for the planet," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's good for business. Companies that lead the charge on sustainability are outperforming their competitors. This isn't a risk, it's an opportunity." As she spoke, Sophia noticed a shift in the room. Some board members who had initially seemed skeptical leaned forward, nodding as they absorbed her ideas. Even Ethan's confident facade showed signs of cracking. He hadn't expected her to be this prepared. When she finished, the board chair glanced around the table. "Thank you, Sophia. This is certainly an ambitious plan." Ethan was quick to respond, his tone measured but pointed. "Ambition doesn't always translate to results. These initiatives are costly and untested. What Sophia is proposing could put us in an even more precarious position." Sophia didn't miss a beat. "And doing nothing could cost us even more. Stagnation is just as dangerous as recklessness. The world is moving forward, and if we don't adapt, we'll be left behind." The room erupted into discussion. Arguments flew back and forth, but Sophia stayed quiet, letting the strength of her presentation speak for itself. Ethan's earlier confidence had shifted to frustration as he watched her gain ground. When the chair finally called for a decision, it wasn't a vote of no confidence. Instead, the board agreed to give Sophia's plan a trial run, with regular updates to monitor its progress. It wasn't a sweeping victory, but it was enough to keep her in the game. After the meeting, Sophia walked out of the boardroom with her head held high. Ethan caught up to her in the hallway, his expression dark. "Well played," he said, his voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. "But don't think for a second this is over." Sophia met his gaze, her own steady and unflinching. "I don't plan to." That evening, the Langston family gathered for dinner at their father's estate. What was meant to be a rare moment of unity quickly devolved into chaos. The tension was palpable from the moment Sophia and Ethan arrived. Their father, oblivious to the day's drama, greeted them with a smile and a glass of whiskey. The meal started politely enough, but the civility didn't last. It began with a subtle jab from Ethan, disguised as a casual remark. "Sophia had quite the performance today," he said, swirling his wine. "She's learning fast." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she refused to rise to the bait. "I had to. Some people keep raising the stakes." Robert frowned. "What's going on here?" Ethan scoffed. "What's going on is that your golden child got herself into a mess, and now we're all supposed to pretend she's the savior of the company." Sophia's restraint snapped. "Golden child? Are you serious? You've been the heir apparent since we were kids. Everything was handed to you while I had to fight for even the smallest bit of recognition. And yet here you are." Ethan shot back. "Dad gave you the top job, no questions asked? Don't act like you're some underdog." Robert raised his voice, cutting through the escalating argument. "Enough. Both of you." But Sophia couldn't stop now. "This isn't just about the company," she said, her voice trembling with years of bottled-up frustration. "This is about you, Ethan. You've always needed to be the center of everything. You can't handle the idea that maybe, just maybe, I have something to offer too." Ethan's face hardened. "And you can't handle the fact that Dad made a mistake." "Stop it," Robert said, his tone sharp. "This family has enough enemies without turning on each other." The table fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. But the damage was done. Sophia and Ethan avoided each other's eyes for the rest of the evening, the rift between them deeper than ever. As she left the estate that night, Sophia felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The battle with Ethan wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she had a chance. She wouldn't back down, not for the board, not for Ethan, and not for anyone else who doubted her. Whatever it took, she was going to prove that she belonged. The following morning, Sophia sat at her desk, staring blankly at a stack of reports. Her conversation with Ethan at dinner replayed in her mind on an endless loop. The rawness of their words, the deep cracks in their relationship, felt insurmountable. She was tired of the fights, tired of proving herself, and tired of feeling like she didn't belong. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a call from the family estate. Robert's assistant, Martha, was on the line. "Miss Langston, your father wanted me to drop off some files at your office, but I've found something else you might want to see." "What is it?" Sophia asked, her brow furrowing. "It's a letter," Martha said, her voice cautious. "It's from your mother." Sophia's breath caught. Their mother, Eleanor, had passed away nearly a decade ago, her warmth and grace leaving an irreplaceable void in their family. The idea of hearing her voice again, even through ink and paper, felt like a gift she wasn't ready for. Martha brought the letter that afternoon. The envelope was yellowed with age, the edges soft from years of handling. Sophia stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Her mother's handwriting was as elegant as she remembered. "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, it means the twins are grown, and you're facing the decision we always knew would come. I want you to remember the promise we made, to guide them toward building something greater together. Ethan and Sophia are different in every way, but that's their greatest strength. Ethan's drive and Sophia's heart complement each other perfectly. Together, they can achieve what neither of them could alone. But their rivalry, it worries me. If we're not careful, it could tear them apart. I trust you, Robert. You'll know what to do when the time comes. Just remember, they're stronger together. Sophia read the letter twice, her heart heavy with emotion. Her mother had seen the potential for partnership between her and Ethan, even when they couldn't. And yet Robert had chosen to keep this vision from them, letting their competition fester. She folded the letter carefully, placing it in her drawer. A quiet determination began to form. She didn't know how to fix things with Ethan, but she owed it to their mother, and to herself, to try. Meanwhile, Ethan was in his own office, poring over a series of confidential documents he had managed to acquire. He had spent the last few weeks subtly investigating Sophia's supporters on the board, suspicious of how quickly some had rallied behind her. What he found unsettled him. The documents revealed a series of private communications between one of the board members, Richard Price, and an outside investor group. The language was vague but unmistakable. Price was positioning himself to push Robert's children out entirely and orchestrate a hostile takeover. The timing of the recall, the rumors about Sophia's leadership, and even Ethan's own discontent, all had been quietly manipulated to weaken the family's hold on the company. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the weight of the discovery sinking in. He had been so focused on his rivalry with Sophia that he hadn't seen the larger game at play. Their feud wasn't just damaging their relationship, it was threatening everything their family had built. For the first time, he questioned his actions. The schemes, the sabotage, the constant one-upmanship, it had all seemed justified in the heat of the moment. But now, he could see the cracks it had created, cracks that someone else was exploiting. That evening, Ethan showed up at Sophia's office unannounced. She was startled to see him standing in the doorway, a stack of papers in his hand. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual edge. Sophia's first instinct was to say no, but something in his expression stopped her. She nodded, gesturing for him to sit. He placed the papers on her desk and slid them toward her. "You need to see this." As she read through the documents, her eyes widened. "Richard Price?" she said incredulously. "He's one of Dad's oldest allies. This can't be right." "It's right," Ethan said grimly. "I've double-checked everything. He's been laying the groundwork for months. And we've been too busy tearing each other apart to notice." Sophia set the papers down, her hands trembling. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Ethan said, his voice heavy, "I don't want to lose this company. And I don't think you do either." She studied him for a long moment, searching for any hint of an ulterior motive. But for once, she saw only sincerity. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. Ethan exhaled, relieved that she wasn't shutting him out. "We need to confront him. Together. The board needs to see that we're united on this, or Price will use our division to his advantage." Sophia hesitated, the wounds of their recent fights still fresh. But then she thought of her mother's letter, of the vision she had for them. This wasn't just about saving the company, it was about honoring their family's legacy. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's do it." The next morning, they met with Robert in his office. His surprise at seeing them together quickly gave way to concern as they laid out the evidence. Robert's expression darkened as he reviewed the documents. "I knew Price was ambitious, but this. I never thought he'd go this far. We've been playing into his hands," Sophia admitted. "He's been using our fights to weaken the family's position." Robert looked at them both, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. "Your mother always hoped you'd find a way to work together. She believed in you, both of you. So do I." Ethan glanced at Sophia, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. "We've made mistakes," he said. "But we're ready to fix them." For the first time in years, there was no animosity in his voice. Sophia nodded, feeling a cautious sense of hope. That afternoon, the three of them confronted Price in a private meeting. The older man tried to deny the accusations at first, but faced with the overwhelming evidence and the united front of the Langston family, He quickly crumbled. By the end of the day, Price had resigned from the board, his plans for a takeover dismantled. It was a hard-won victory, but it was only the beginning. As they walked out of the meeting, Sophia turned to Ethan. "This doesn't mean we're suddenly best friends. I wouldn't dream of it," Ethan replied with a faint smirk. Then, more seriously, he added, "But maybe we don't have to be enemies either." Sophia offered a small smile in return. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And for the first time, she felt like they might actually find a way forward, together. 1 week had passed since the menacing discovery, and it was time for another board meeting. That morning, the boardroom was silent, the air charged with anticipation. Sophia and Ethan stood at the head of the long, gleaming table, their expressions determined. Around them, the board members sat in tense silence, their eyes darting between the two siblings who, for the first time in years, stood side by side. The days since Richard Price's resignation had been a whirlwind of preparation. They had managed to avert the immediate crisis, but the company's future still hung by a thread. Price had allies on the board, and the fallout from his departure threatened to destabilize Langston Enterprises even further. It was clear that this meeting would be a decisive moment, not just for the company, but for the twins themselves. Sophia glanced at Ethan, and for the first time, she felt something other than resentment when she looked at him. They had spent the past few days working together, pooling their strengths to craft a comprehensive plan that would address the company's vulnerabilities and chart a path forward. It hadn't been easy. Their differing styles often clashed, and old grievances occasionally bubbled to the surface. But somehow, they had managed to create something neither could have accomplished alone. Ethan stepped forward to address the board, his usual confidence tempered with an uncharacteristic humility. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "We've called this meeting to address the challenges our company is facing and to present a united vision for moving forward." He gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed a detailed analysis of the company's current state. The presentation was sharp and precise, a testament to Ethan's strategic mind. He outlined the financial implications of the recent recall, the steps they had taken to stabilize operations, and the need for decisive action to restore investor confidence. When he finished, Sophia stepped up, her demeanor calm but resolute. "Ethan has outlined where we are. I want to talk about where we're going." She clicked to the next slide, revealing a bold new initiative, the Langston Revitalization Plan. It was a synthesis of their individual strengths, combining Ethan's pragmatism with Sophia's vision for innovation and sustainability. "We can't afford to focus solely on damage control," she said. "We need to rebuild, not just our operations but our reputation. This plan focuses on long-term growth through 3 core strategies: sustainable innovation, stronger partnerships, and a renewed commitment to transparency." As she spoke, Sophia felt the weight of the board's scrutiny, but she didn't falter. She had spent years doubting her place in the company, always feeling overshadowed by Ethan. But now, standing here with him, she felt a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just about proving herself, it was about proving what they could accomplish together. The board's reactions were mixed at first. Some members, still loyal to Price, questioned the feasibility of their plan. But Ethan and Sophia countered every concern with data, projections, and clear, actionable steps. Their arguments were persuasive, their teamwork undeniable. By the time they finished, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The board members, who had once been divided, now seemed cautiously optimistic. The chairperson leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "This is an ambitious plan," he said. "But it's also a promising one. I appreciate the way you've come together to present this. It's clear that Langston Enterprises is in capable hands." The twins exchanged a glance, a flicker of relief passing between them. It wasn't a complete victory, the road ahead would still be difficult, but it was a crucial step in the right direction. Later that evening, after the meeting had concluded and the board members had left, Sophia and Ethan found themselves alone in the boardroom. The adrenaline of the day was beginning to fade, leaving behind a quiet exhaustion. "That went better than I expected," Sophia said, sinking into a chair. Ethan smirked, leaning against the table. Better than I expected, too. Though I'll admit, you carried the day with that revitalization plan. Sophia looked at him, surprised. Are you actually giving me credit? Don't get used to it. He teased, but his tone was lighter than usual. Then he sobered. Look, Sophia, I need to say something. I've been wrong. About a lot of things. About you. She blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan had never been one for apologies. I underestimated you. He continued, his voice quieter now. I let my own ego, my own insecurities, blind me to what you bring to the table. And for that, I'm sorry. Sophia studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity, but found none. Thank you, she said softly. And I need to admit something, too. I've spent so much time resenting you, feeling like I had to fight just to be noticed. I let that resentment cloud my judgment. But working with you these past few days, I've realized something. You're good at what you do. Really good. And I see now why Dad always had such high expectations for you. Ethan smiled faintly. That's the closest thing to a compliment I've ever gotten from you. Don't get used to it, she echoed with a smirk. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling over them. For the first time, the tension between them felt less like a barrier and more like a bridge, a connection forged through hardship and shared purpose. As they left the boardroom, Sophia felt a glimmer of hope. They still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she believed they could face the challenges ahead, not as rivals, but as partners. And for Langston Enterprises, that was the beginning of something truly extraordinary. The family gathered at the Langston estate on a warm, quiet evening. The long dining table in the garden was set with delicate white linens, flickering candles, and an array of dishes prepared by the estate's chef. It was an intimate affair, just Robert, Sophia, Ethan, and a few close friends of the family. Sophia adjusted the napkin on her lap, feeling a mix of emotions. The events of the past weeks had been transformative, not only for the company but for her relationship with Ethan. They were still figuring out how to work together, but the animosity that once defined their dynamic had begun to fade, replaced by a cautious respect. Ethan sat across from her, unusually quiet, sipping from a crystal glass of scotch. Even he seemed uncharacteristically reflective, his usual sharp edges softened in the glow of the candlelight. Robert raised his glass, drawing everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This isn't just a celebration, it's a moment of transition, a passing of the torch. He looked at Sophia and Ethan, his gaze warm and filled with pride. When I made the decision to step down, I knew it would be one of the most challenging moments of my life. Langston Enterprises has been my life's work, and entrusting it to someone else wasn't something I took lightly. Sophia felt a lump form in her throat as her father continued. I chose you, Sophia, because I saw in you a vision for the future. You remind me of your mother in so many ways, your creativity, your passion for making a difference. And I chose to challenge you, Ethan, because I knew that your drive and determination would push you to grow. What I hoped, but didn't know for certain, was that this challenge would bring you together. Ethan glanced at Sophia, and for once, she saw no trace of rivalry in his expression, only understanding. Robert took a deep breath, his voice tinged with emotion. Your mother believed in you both. She saw what you could accomplish together, even when you couldn't see it yourselves. And tonight, seeing how far you've come, I know she was right. He raised his glass higher. To Sophia and Ethan, the future of Langston Enterprises. The group echoed the toast, and glasses clinked all around. Sophia smiled, her cheeks warm, while Ethan offered a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't often that their father's words carried so much weight, but tonight they did. After dinner, Robert led the twins to his private study, a room lined with shelves of leather-bound books and adorned with memorabilia from his decades at the helm of Langston Enterprises. He sat behind the desk, motioning for them to take the chairs opposite him. I've made a decision, he said, folding his hands. Sophia, you will officially take the title of CEO. That's the role I believe you were meant to fill. But this company is too large, too complex for one person to handle alone. Ethan, I want you to step into the role of Chief Strategy Officer, a new position designed to capitalize on your strengths. Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Chief Strategy Officer? Your ability to see 10 steps ahead is invaluable, Robert explained. I want you to focus on long-term planning, partnerships, and acquisitions, areas where your talents will shine. Together, the two of you will lead this company into its next chapter. Sophia felt a wave of relief and gratitude. She had expected tension, perhaps even resistance from Ethan, but instead, he simply nodded. I can work with that, Ethan said, his tone even. As long as it's clear that we're equals in this. Robert smiled knowingly. That was always the plan. The next morning, the official announcement was made. The press release highlighted Sophia's appointment as CEO and Ethan's new role as CISO, emphasizing the collaborative approach they would bring to Langston Enterprises. The media buzzed with speculation, but internally, the company felt a shift, one of cautious optimism. Sophia and Ethan stood together at the front of the main conference hall as employees gathered to hear the announcement in person. The crowd was a mix of familiar faces, some supportive, others skeptical. But as Sophia began to speak, she felt a growing sense of confidence. This company has been through a lot recently, she said. But every challenge we've faced has taught us something valuable. We've learned the importance of resilience, of adaptability, and most importantly, of working together. I'm honored to step into the role of CEO, but I want to make one thing clear: this is not a solo journey. My brother, Ethan, and I will be leading this company together, drawing on each other's strengths to build something extraordinary. The applause was genuine, though not unanimous. It would take time to win everyone over, but Sophia was ready for the challenge. After the gathering dispersed, Sophia and Ethan lingered in the hall, watching as employees filtered out. For a moment, others spoke. You handled that well, Ethan said finally. I wasn't sure you'd manage the crowd. Sophia smirked. Is that another compliment? Careful, Ethan, people might start thinking you like me. Let's not get carried away, he replied, but there was a teasing glint in his eye. They walked side by side toward the elevator, the tension that had once defined their relationship now replaced by something lighter, more hopeful. Do you think we can actually pull this off? Sophia asked as the elevator doors closed. Ethan glanced at her, his expression serious but not unkind. We don't have a choice. But yeah, I think we can. When the elevator reached the top floor, they stepped out together, standing in the expansive executive suite with its panoramic views of the city. The sun was setting, casting the room in a warm, golden light. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, taking in the view. The skyline stretched before them, a reminder of the vastness of the world they were now responsible for leading. Sophia glanced at Ethan, a rare smile softening her features. Here's to not killing each other in the process. Ethan chuckled. I'll drink to that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the twins stood together, ready to shape the future of Langston Enterprises, not as rivals, but as partners. It was a new beginning, one forged through conflict, growth, and the realization that together, they were stronger than they ever could be apart. As the sun sets on this chapter of the Langston family's journey, we're reminded that success isn't just about individual brilliance, it's about learning to work together, even when it's the hardest thing to do. Sophia and Ethan's story shows us that growth often comes from challenges, and that sometimes, the strongest partnerships are forged through conflict. What do you think? Can rivals truly become allies, or do old wounds always linger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of ambition, rivalry, and redemption, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more inspiring tales of leadership, family, and the twists and turns of the corporate world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.